The red-eye from Boston to Seattle prepared for takeoff. In economy seat 12F, single father Marcus Hale gently secured the belt around his small sleeping daughter Lily. Up front, CEO Samantha Ward watched, her perfect lips twisted in a sneer. "Discount ticket people always ruin the atmosphere," she muttered. Suddenly, the plane hit severe turbulence. An urgent demand sliced through the panic from the cockpit. "Any military personnel on board? Any pilots?" The captain's eyes swept the cabin, ignoring the business suits. He looked straight at the tired man in 12F. His voice was a solemn, piercing command. "Sir, they're saluting you." Silence. Marcus Hale, 38, was defined by three things: the scent of stale coffee, the permanent, deep exhaustion that never quite left his eyes, and the small, trusting hand of his 7-year-old daughter Lily in his. He was a single father who lived a life of quiet sacrifice, working 3 different minimum wage jobs: a security guard overnight, a library cleaner at dawn, and a short order cook in the evenings, just to keep the bills paid. Every single penny earned was meticulously saved for Lily. His ex-wife, Lily's mother, had tragically passed away 5 years prior, and Marcus had raised his daughter alone, focusing only on her happiness. Their flight to Seattle, a rare trip to visit his late wife's family, was booked on the cheapest tickets available. They were the very definition of economy class, a world away from the luxury beyond the curtain. Samantha Ward, 32, was the CEO of a cutting-edge investment firm. Her world was tailored suits, private jets, and the belief that wealth conferred not just comfort, but superiority. She was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly intolerant of anything that disturbed her perfectly managed environment. She despised the unnecessary noise of the public, especially the sound of children. Captain Mason Briggs, 50, a career pilot, was in the cockpit. He was a man with a steady gaze and a subtle, weathered look that hinted at a past in the military, specifically the Air Force, though he never spoke of it. The conflict began before the main cabin door was even secured. A flight attendant politely requested that Samantha temporarily stand so Marcus could maneuver Lily's small backpack past the crowded aisle. Samantha didn't just refuse, she turned her refusal into an indictment of Marcus's life choices. "Why can't they just wait for another flight?" she said, her voice dripping with acid, loud enough for the entire business class section to hear. "I paid for this comfort zone specifically to avoid being inconvenienced. Tell them to try being punctual or, better yet, upgrade if they want space." The flight attendant's face flushed with embarrassment. Marcus, holding Lily tightly, simply dipped his head in apology, even though he had done nothing wrong. Lily, sensitive and observant, whispered, her small voice heartbreakingly soft, "Daddy, does that mean she doesn't like me?" Marcus gently stroked her hair. "It's okay, sweetie. Some people just forget that kindness is free. We have each other, and that's enough." As the plane taxied, Samantha's complaints continued, fueled by the minor distraction of Lily's nervous, excited chatter. "Honestly," she sighed dramatically, adjusting her expensive silk scarf, "it's impossible to work or relax with this noise. Some people should understand where they belong." Samantha then turned her contempt directly on the flight attendant, demanding, "Can you please move him and his child further back? This is affecting my concentration." The flight attendant could only apologize and move away, defeated. A passenger across the aisle from Marcus, a loud man in a cheap suit, chimed in. "She's right, pal. This isn't your living room. Keep the kid quiet or go somewhere else." Marcus simply pulled Lily tighter into his side, his face betraying no emotion, worried only about calming her slight trembling caused by the loud engine vibrations. At that moment, the flight attendant, passing by, paused and met Marcus's eyes. She offered him a small, heartfelt smile of compassion. "You're the best father I've ever seen," she mouthed quietly. Marcus managed a sad, tired smile in return. First clue. Just before the final cabin check, an elderly man in seat 13A, a distinguished gentleman with kind eyes and the easy posture of someone who had seen the world, leaned forward to Marcus. He spoke in a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Son," he said, his gaze fixed on Marcus's reserved face, You have the eyes of a man who has seen the sky from very close range, the kind who knows what it feels like when the earth is small. But you've chosen a very quiet life. Marcus merely offered a slow, slight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He didn't deny it, but he didn't confirm it. He simply returned his focus to Lily, letting the observation hang in the air like a barely spoken secret, unaware that the quiet life he desperately sought was about to be violently interrupted. The true crisis struck an hour into the flight, just as the cabin lights dimmed for the long haul. A sudden, jarring impact, a low thud followed by a brief, terrifying drop in altitude, rocked the aircraft. The cabin lights flickered off, plunging the interior into a suffocating 2 seconds of total darkness before the emergency lighting snapped on. Screams erupted instantly. Business class was not immune. Samantha, shedding her arrogance, grabbed the armrests, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Captain Briggs's voice, though firm, carried a noticeable tremor through the static-laced intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. We've experienced a minor mechanical issue with engine number 2. We are proceeding on a single-engine operation. Please remain calm. The flight attendants are proceeding with emergency checklists." The passenger who had mocked Marcus earlier began to hyperventilate. "We're going down, aren't we?" Marcus's reaction was eerily composed. He lifted Lily, placing her head gently against his chest, shielding her from the chaos. His eyes, though wide awake, scanned the fuselage not with fear, but with a detached professional assessment. He was analyzing the vibrations, the yaw, the subtle shift in the cabin pressure, data points only a trained pilot would register. Samantha, still gripping her seat, saw his strange composure from across the aisle. She leaned forward, her fear forcing out a question stripped of its usual malice. "Why aren't you panicking? What is wrong with you?" She couldn't reconcile the image of the tired, quiet father with the sudden, cold competence in his eyes. Marcus didn't turn his head. "Panic is a luxury," he said simply. "It doesn't help." The aircraft shuddered violently, losing several hundred feet in a terrifying moment of freefall. While others screamed, Marcus's gaze was locked on the tiny, dim emergency lights, observing their subtle flickering, then quickly checking the wing. He noted the asymmetrical movement, a detail that screamed catastrophe to his trained mind. Samantha, watching him intently, was baffled. "Why are you looking at the wing? Are you a structural engineer?" Marcus ignored her, gently adjusting Lily's small blanket. The turbulence eased, but the low grinding noise from the engine persisted, a sound that only confirmed his deepest fears. This wasn't a mechanical issue. It was a fight for survival. He closed his eyes, praying the captain wouldn't realize who was on board. 10 minutes of terrifying, grinding flight passed. The situation clearly wasn't minor. The grinding sound from the right wing was getting worse. The aircraft was yawing slightly, the autopilot struggling to compensate. The air grew colder in the cabin. Then the captain's voice returned, this time desperate, cutting through the fear. "Attention all passengers and crew. This is an urgent, non-standard request. If there is any active or former military personnel, specifically flight engineers, air traffic controllers, or certified Air Force pilots on board, you must immediately notify a flight attendant." The entire aircraft froze. The collective fear was palpable. Samantha whispered, her voice barely audible, "It must be serious if they are asking for help outside the crew." As the flight attendants moved nervously down the aisles, checking for responses, Lily stirred, momentarily waking up from the unsettling noise. She looked up at her father. "Daddy, why don't you tell them?" she mumbled sleepily. "You used to fly the big ones." Samantha, seated only a few rows away, overheard the innocent, childlike comment. Her head snapped toward Marcus. You're a pilot?" she demanded, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. Marcus shook his head slightly, trying to wave off the attendant who was now rushing towards him. "Not anymore," he murmured, trying to keep the secret buried. "It was a long time ago." But the flight attendant had already heard enough. Her eyes widened with sudden, profound hope, and she sprinted toward the cockpit. A minute later, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Briggs emerged, his face grim, his eyes sharp and focused like a blade. "Marcus Hale, he called out, his voice a drill sergeant's bark. Samantha stared, completely bewildered. They know his name? Captain Briggs marched straight to 12F. He didn't use military language, but his posture, straight, rigid, demanding, was unmistakable. He gripped Marcus's shoulder with a strength that belied his age. Major Hale, is it really you? Is it the Ghost Wing? The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. It was the name of a life he had buried, a uniform he had resigned, a promise he had broken to himself. He looked from Briggs's desperate face down to Lily, who was stirring slightly. He had sworn to her that he would never fly again, that he would always be safe on the ground. The choice was agonizing: duty or the security of the life he had built brick by quiet brick. Sir, Marcus said, his voice husky with conflict, I resigned my commission. I'm a civilian now, a father. The entire economy class cabin swiveled to stare. Marcus sighed, a gesture of profound weariness and resignation. He gently set Lily down. I left the military 5 years ago, Captain. Briggs didn't loosen his grip. We need you, Major. The mechanical failure is worse than we let on. The primary engine controls are jammed. We can't adjust the thrust properly on the remaining engine without risking a catastrophic stall. The plane is operating on severely restricted fuel flow. We are losing lift and yaw control. If we can't fix it now, we have to attempt an emergency landing without proper vector control, and that landing will kill us all. You are the only person alive who ever successfully managed a high-altitude, single-engine cross-wind stall recovery under these specific parameters. You trained for this, Marcus. We need the Ghost Wing in the air. Samantha, utterly stunned, pushed through the crowd. You were in the Air Force? Her voice was a cracked whisper. Marcus finally looked at her, his eyes distant. I was a fighter pilot. I flew F-22 Raptors. I retired. He spoke the words like a confession, the admission costing him visible effort. Briggs leaned closer, his voice dropping to a fierce, emotional level. No, you didn't retire. You were the best of us, and you're the only person who knows how to manually compensate for this flaw. Look outside, Marcus. They are saluting you on the ground. Every base control tower, every air traffic controller in this sector knows that call sign. They know what's on this plane. They are cheering you on, hoping you are real. You're the reason a lot of good people are still alive today. Samantha felt the blood drain from her face. She had dismissed a man who flew the most advanced fighter jet in the world, a man whose presence in the cockpit brought immediate, global military respect. She, the high-flying CEO, couldn't even navigate a small business jet without her co-pilot. Marcus Hale was the kind of person her entire privileged world was built to serve and protect, yet she had treated him like refuse. The witness from seat 9C, the former serviceman who had observed Marcus earlier, now struggled to his feet, ignoring his cane. His eyes were shining with recognition and fierce pride, and he snapped to attention in the aisle. He whispered to his neighbor, I know him. He's Ghost Wing. Huh. The only pilot who brought my entire ground crew back during the sandstorm siege. We all thought he was dead. Samantha's face went white with shame. The man she had ridiculed as a burden in seat 12F, the man she mocked for his cheap ticket in quiet life, was a legend. A ghost returned to save them all. She realized that his tired eyes weren't the sign of poverty, but the lasting exhaustion of war. The shame was a physical blow, a burning knot in her stomach. Captain Briggs didn't wait for Marcus's permission. He practically dragged him toward the cockpit, his desperation overriding all protocol. As they entered the small space, the flight engineer and the co-pilot, both young and terrified, stared. The engineer, a burly man named Dave, looked Marcus up and down. It's him, he breathed, his voice thick with disbelief. Major Hale, you're supposed to be. Are you really alive? Samantha tried to follow, but a flight attendant, following protocol, gently blocked her path. She pressed her face against the edge of the cockpit door, watching the unbelievable scene unfold inside. Marcus, instantly professional, shed his tiredness. He was no longer the humble single father. He was a man transformed by necessity, sharp and commanding. He spoke to Briggs and the co-pilot, in the clipped, abbreviated jargon of the sky, a language of vectors, yaw, and thrust ratios that Samantha couldn't even begin to decipher. Briggs pointed to a complex auxiliary panel. The stabilizer linkage is receiving corrupted feedback. We need manual, feathered adjustments to compensate for the stall risk, but it requires two hands and a timing sequence no civilian pilot has the instincts for. Marcus took a deep breath, his hands, the same hands that struggled with a child's safety buckle, now moving with smooth, deadly competence over the controls. Twist 1. The Ghost Wings Scar. As Marcus began his delicate ballet with the faulty system, painful memories flooded his consciousness, triggered by the familiar smell of burning oil and pressurized air. He saw flashes of the day 5 years ago, his fighter squadron flying into a devastating ambush, the enemy rocket striking his own fighter, the desperate command to his wingman to execute the extraction maneuver without him, the ejector seat failing as he fought to stabilize his shot-up jet long enough for the others to escape. He lost his squadron, but he saved his wingman and the ground crew. He was officially listed as missing in action, presumed deceased due to the severity of the damage, and the Air Force had kept his survival as a secret, placing him in the civilian population under a rehabilitation and observation status. He didn't just walk away, he lost his wings, bringing everyone else home. Samantha, still glued to the doorway, finally heard the full, chilling conversation between Briggs and Dave. "He's the only one, isn't he?" Dave whispered. "He's the only pilot who ever recovered a Raptor with a C stabilizer after a missile strike. I read the classified report. He did it on pure instinct, half dead." Briggs nodded grimly. "He earned the name Ghost Wing that day, son. He's the reason many of us are still here, and he's the reason this plane is still in the air. He's flying it with his brain and his trauma, not the controls." Samantha sank back against the wall, covering her mouth with her trembling hands. Tears of pure, hot shame streamed down her face. She had judged a hero, a man who paid for her first-class safety with his quiet, broken life. She felt the full, crushing weight of her arrogance. Twist 2. The CEO's redemption. Just as Marcus reached the critical point of manually compensating for the stabilizer lock, a piercing scream erupted from the main cabin. "Help! He's having a heart attack! He stopped breathing!" It was the loud, rude passenger from 13C, the man who had sneered at Marcus earlier, telling him that economy class wasn't his living room. Samantha vaulted to her feet, forgetting the shame, forgetting the turbulence, only focused on the man collapsing in the aisle. She yelled toward the cockpit door, her voice raw with urgency. "We need Marcus. He knows first aid. Bring him back." The flight attendant, equally panicked, rushed out. "We can't. Major Hale is the only thing keeping us from spiraling out of the sky. We need to maintain this flight path for 2 more minutes." Samantha looked around wildly. No doctor was on board. The flight attendant was trained, but frozen by the chaos. She saw the dying man, and she saw her chance for true redemption. Not just from her cruelty to Marcus, but from her own privileged, useless life. She, the high-flying CEO, had zero practical skills. She threw herself into the aisle. She recalled a blurry, half-remembered training video from her corporate retreat and began CPR, her expensive manicure ruined, her hands shaking violently with exertion and fear. "Marcus saved the whole plane," she muttered through tears and strained breaths. "Now I have to save this one man." The sight of the arrogant CEO desperately trying to perform CPR was enough to shock the entire cabin into silence. In the cockpit, Marcus heard the commotion. Briggs looked at him, his face a silent question. Marcus was inches away from completing the stabilizer calibration. "Go," Briggs commanded, his voice suddenly calm. "I'll hold the current vector for 60 seconds. That's all you get. Save him, Major." Marcus, without a word, snatched his field medical kit, a small worn pouch he always carried, and burst out of the cockpit. He sprinted down the aisle. Samantha looked up, her face streaked with tears and sweat. "Don't let him die, please," she choked out. "I failed. You have to save him." Marcus didn't judge her effort. He simply checked the man's pulse, quickly assessed the airway, performed a sharp, precise abdominal thrust, followed by rapid chest compressions, the efficient, decisive movements of a battlefield medic. With a rattling gasp, the man began to breathe again. The entire cabin erupted in a chorus of sobs and shouts of relief. Samantha covered her mouth, staring at Marcus as if he were an actual ghost, a miracle made real. The child's wisdom. As Marcus rushed back to the cockpit, a little girl sitting next to her mother quietly summed up the profound lesson of the day. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice full of awe, "he saved everyone, but he never even says he's a hero." Marcus returned to the cockpit, completed the final adjustments, and managed to hand over the stable controls to Captain Briggs with 40 seconds to spare. 30 minutes later, the plane was on final approach to Seattle. The landing, thanks to Marcus's quick fix and Briggs's skill, was surprisingly smooth, just a little heavy. As the plane taxied to the gate, the captain spoke over the intercom, his voice thick with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Briggs. We have landed safely. I want to thank you for your patience and for the incredible assistance provided by a member of our traveling community." Samantha, looking out the window, gasped. Lining both sides of the taxiway, extending nearly a quarter of a mile, were rows upon rows of airport personnel. Maintenance crews, baggage handlers, other pilots, security guards, and fire rescue workers. Every single one of them was standing at attention, their right hands raised in a rigid salute. They were saluting Marcus. Tears blurred Samantha's vision. She hadn't just mocked a hero, she had ridiculed the very definition of service. I made fun of a man who lives a life of quiet sacrifice," she stammered, shame radiating off her. Marcus, holding Lily tightly, started gathering his things, trying to slip away unnoticed in the crowd. But Briggs's voice cut through the cabin, booming with undeniable pride. "Passengers of Flight 482, please remain seated for a moment. Please join me in acknowledging Major Marcus Ghostwing Hale, the man who just saved every single one of us." The entire cabin, business class and economy, erupted in thunderous applause. Marcus's face turned scarlet. He gave a tiny, humble nod. He had never sought the spotlight. Samantha pushed forward, ignoring the rules, ignoring the social distance she usually maintained. She approached Marcus, tears streaming freely down her face, falling onto her expensive silk blouse. She knelt slightly, meeting his eyes. "I am so profoundly sorry, Marcus," she choked out. "I was judgmental, selfish, and cruel. I owe you a thank you that one lifetime can't repay. I owe you my life." Marcus smiled gently, a genuine, tired smile that reached his eyes for the first time. "I'm just a father trying to get his daughter home, ma'am." But Samantha didn't recoil or turn away as she would have before. She reached out and held his hand, her gaze steady and sincere. "No. You are the most courageous man I have ever met. You taught me that true wealth is invisible." The rest of the passengers waited until Samantha was done. Then, one by one, they filed past Marcus, offering quiet nods, handshakes, and whispered words of gratitude. The community of the aircraft had been purged of its arrogance, humbled by the man in 12F. If you believe that true strength lies in humility and that quiet heroes deserve recognition, please type, "I will live kindly" in the comments below. A month later, Marcus received an official, heavy envelope from the Air Force. It contained a letter requesting his presence to receive a long-overdue Medal of Valor. He respectfully declined, explaining that his only priority was raising Lily and keeping her world stable. But Samantha Ward refused to let him retreat into the shadows. She didn't approach him with a business proposal or an expensive gift. Instead, she showed up at his small apartment, carrying a simple homemade casserole and a bottle of cheap wine. Lily, recognizing her new friend, ran out and hugged Samantha's legs. "Miss Samantha, you're here again!" Marcus stood in the doorway, a look of profound warmth on his face. "She comes by quite often," he teased gently. Samantha looked directly into his eyes, her voice soft but steady. "Because I want to be here." She set the casserole down on the tiny kitchen table. Her hands, which once only signed million-dollar deals, were still scarred from the failed CPR attempt on the plane. She looked down, then back up at him. "Marcus, I don't want the business class life anymore," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. It's empty. It's loud. It's selfish. I sold my share of the company. I am done chasing a title that means nothing. She took a hesitant step closer. I want the life in seat 12F. If I can sit next to you. Marcus laughed, a deep, joyful sound that echoed in the small space, a sound Lily rarely heard. He pulled her into a warm embrace. Lily cheered, jumping up and down. Does this mean I get a new mommy, Daddy? Samantha blushed deeply but nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. It means we're going to be a team, Lilybug, a team that uses kindness first. The symbol. In their small, shared kitchen, a final symbol of their journey hung on the refrigerator, held up by a cheap magnet. It wasn't a photo of a medal or a news clipping about the plane landing. It was Marcus's original, crumpled airline ticket, the one that read Boston to Seattle, seat 12F. Samantha had framed it mentally as she looked at it every day. This is the day I met the man who taught me everything, she would often say to herself. In the small, cozy apartment, the three of them, the former CEO, the ghost wing, and the little girl, ate dinner under the soft glow of the kitchen light, finding a peace and genuine wealth that no business-class cabin in the world could ever offer. The only wealth that mattered was the love and respect they shared in their tiny, quiet kingdom. If you believe in stories that touch the heart like this one, leave a comment and subscribe. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.